affected me in a certain way now. How many of you have ever been affected by something and you didn't even realize you were being affected by it? You were just acting out of something, right? That's what triggers do. Triggers go all the way to our subconscious. All right, let me jump forward with our 10 minutes. I want to cover this. When you're triggered, and I can't go as much into this as I want to. When you're triggered and it's negative sometimes, you go into 4 phases, right? Fight, flight, fear, or fawn. Fight. Type of response can be physical fighting as well as using your voice to project yourself. Anybody ever seen somebody that was triggered and they get upset and they get mad and they start to yell, right? They're projecting their voice as a defense. What happens when you're triggered is, and we're going to go into some neurobiology, not too much, I don't want to go too deep, but when you're triggered, what happens is literally chemicals are released in your brains. So when I talk about mental health isn't just about the mind. There's a physical component to the body. Remember, think, act, feel, right? There's a physical component to it. When you're triggered, different chemicals are released throughout your body, right? And unfortunately, when you're triggered in a situation that makes you anxious or fear, a chemical called cortisol is released from your brain and it circulates throughout your body. That's why they call it the circulatory system, right? There's other chemicals that are released too, but it sends signals from the brain. It's like if anybody's ever drank Jell-O, water shots, we're not talking alcohol, water shots, right? It's like taking shots and shots of different chemicals, right? So when you're triggered, chemical flows throughout your body, cortisol, sends you into fight, flight, fear, or fawn. Flight, this can mean physically leaving a situation that causes fear or can be done by mentally checking out. You either leave the situation, run away from it, or you shut down and disassociate, disconnect from what's happening, right? Fear, freezing, that's the freeze. So you ever see people that are about to get hit by a car and they freeze, they can't run, they can't move, right? That fear piece, fear may be literally in that physically stopping you moving when you feel threatened. It can also be shown by inability to speak or continue doing an activity. So you ever heard that phrase, frozen in fear? That's where it comes from. And fawn, this type of response is seeking safety from a person who is making you feel threatened, right? You ever heard of Stockholm Syndrome before? It's like when someone's kidnapped and then they start to fall for that person that kidnapped them or have sympathy, right? They're seeking safety from what is causing them fear. Safety. Everybody got that? You can take a picture of that too. I encourage you to take pictures of these stuff. All right. Boom. These are responses. Is this good so far? I want to give you all some tangible things. This is something you can take a picture at because these are different behavioral manifestations, right? Fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Now these are the actions that happen. Angry outbursts can be fight, controlling, the bullying, narcissistic, that's a buzzword we use often, right? Explosive behavior. Freeze, difficulty making decisions. Anybody have difficulty making decisions when they triggered, right? They feel frozen in time, stuck, disassociated, isolating, numb. Flight, maybe a flight is running. Sometimes people run to work to not deal with their issues, right? They will work and overwork or distract themselves. Overthinking, I'm an overthinker. I'm a career overthinker, right? Panic, right? Anxiety, difficulty sitting still, perfectionist, that's flight. How do I get away from what I'm dealing with and not necessarily deal with it, right? Fawn can be someone that's a people pleaser. Lack of identity, having trouble with boundaries. That was me coming up especially. I have to grow in how I deal with and set boundaries effectively for myself, right? Overwhelmed or codependent. Let's just say if someone's in a relationship and they depend on the other person for their happiness, that could be a codependent response, right? To a trigger. You see what I'm saying? The reason why I'm bringing these up, and I want you to take pictures of them, because these things come out in family relationships, right? And these things come out in intimate relationships a lot of times. And we don't know how to recognize them, we don't know how to respond to them, right? So it's kind of and sometimes we have these things, and if we don't have the language to identify what's happening to us, what's happening in our bodies, literally, because whenever we're triggered, something happens in our bodies. That's why we feel physical sensations. We may feel a pit of our stomach or a pain in our chest, or our heart might start beating faster, right? That's because when we're triggered, our body goes into survival mode, right? We start to connect to the lower parts of our brain, which is I don't want to geek out too much, right? But I love this stuff. the lower parts of our brain, the reptilian parts of our brain. I'm saying this because sometimes when we think about mental health, there are physical and chemical factors inside of us, right, that we can now understand and start to shift the way that we show up and we are impacted, right? All right, everybody with me so far? Take pictures of this, please, please. All right. So, with the time I have,